after many questions, I've been asked to do these undisguised now, so I don't give a shit. So it's undisguised. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and stuff. I hope you can fucking understand them now, because people are moaning.
Hello, my name's Will. I'm a proper real life motherfucking living werewolf. This is my story. I want to get it out there. I know I'm going to get captured again at some point. If you listen to my prior 6 episodes, then you'll get an understanding of where this one goes. Yeah, we're out there. There's not many of us, but it's just to tell you that we're out there, we're real. We're so far talking about the story about when I was captured by the army and they took me on board and stuff. I'm going to talk about, like, now, the posit side of me, the werewolf side of me, how I got to be a werewolf, and hopefully you'll kind of understand from there how this kind of happened, how I actually became a werewolf. Yeah, so I would go back and listen to the last ones if you want to. I don't actually give a shit, but it'll probably do your head good. Yeah, anyway, here's my story. So one of my first recollections was one of me in my cot. I was a tiny baby. I have a first memory, not of when, but of what. I remember I could, like, hear some snuffling and a sense of movement from the floor very close to me. I have no idea how old I was, but I knew or sensed that something was in the darkened room with me, and it seemed to be coming onto my personal space and breathing strangely. Then there was, like, this overpowering smell, musky smell when I think about it. And whatever that thing was in the bedroom, it moved around the floor as though searching for something. It would often pause in silence before continuing with its snuffling search. This was like the 1970s, so my mum and dad had none of that baby monitoring shit that we see today, so I don't think they ever heard it, and maybe they could never have heard it. Perhaps it was just me who could, I'm not sure. I can't remember seeing anything at first. Maybe it was just because I was too young. Probably my sight had not appropriately developed at this point. I've no idea. But it was a presence in the room, and it wasn't a comfortable presence either. It did not feel right even to my baby mind. It felt like the thing was searching for something, and I think that something was me. Then one night something big nudged the cot. It had to be big. It was like just brief, but the nudger then stopped as though it had bumped into something that I had not seen. It knocked the bed another time pretty hard, and in moving it gave me a shake, and I think that must have disturbed me, and I gurgled. I think it was that one small noise that changed my life and made it what it is. Whatever it was had noticed me for the first time, and its breathing intensified, and it became still and focused. I remember to this day turning my head towards the area of the noise, and I'd come from, well, the noise had come from, and seen a large yellow eye looking at me through the slats between the side of my cot. It had found me. I did not yell or anything. I did not cry. Actually, I still remember to this day I was just really interested in what this thing was. It might have been me being able to remember more as I grew in developing my senses or something, or it may have been that the thing became more of a frequent visitor to my room, but I sensed its presence more and more. It was infrequently showing itself, but it was there. I could smell it, I could feel it, and I could hear it in the background. As I grew older, I got used to it. Sometimes I would see a dark shadow in the night. Sometimes I would see an eye or a flash of tooth. As I started to grow and get more mobile, I saw more and more of it, and it just became normal. Then one night it kind of happened. I didn't know why this night was chosen, but I remember it clearly. My parents had positioned the cot so the foot of it faced the doorway. My mother had taken to leaving the bedroom door open and the hall light on so that sunlight was brought into the room for my comfort. The shadows that presented them at the door at night were reassuring shapes of my parents as they checked on me or came in to suit my needs. Be that, change my nappy, my diaper, or feed me. But this particular shadow at the doorway was definitely not my parents' shadow. It was like a large black shape, a shape that poked my ancestral DNA and shouted at me to be frightened, to scream for help, to get away. Even at this young age, I was able to control my emotional self. I could ignore these sensations and was just more interested in what it was. It had really, kind of grabbed my attention. It moved from the doorway to the base of my bed in utter silence, and it loomed. I love the word loomed. It loomed. It loomed over the cot as it slowly came into the light. It was like a black-haired wolf thing. Not that I knew what a wolf looked like then. It was not in the right proportions, though. Its wolfy thing seemed overly pronounced on its body, its teeth, eyes, ears and paws all too large for the rest of its form. It focused on me. Its breath was stale and its eyes were boring into mine. They were strangely hypnotic and actually reassuring in a way. Oh, excuse me. It was most definitely black, but not black like a typical piece of black clothing or painted thing, but just genuinely black. Its shadowy body swallowed any of the light that entered the room and made the body of this thing just like pure fucking darkness. As it moved forward, it brought its head down on the edge of the cot and it leant its bottom jaw there on the bottom of the cot, just looking at me down the line of its canine snout. And it just fucking stood there and stared at me as though it wanted something yet was afraid to ask. At this point, I just stared back. I was trying to take in the whole of the thing and looking at the majesty of it. It was fucking beautiful, man. I then remember a voice in my head, not saying something I understand, but asking me to come to it. So I turned over on my belly and made my way to the monstrous face at the end of the bed. I was now crawling towards it and wanting to touch it. I actually really wanted to be with it. The giant head, because that's all I could see, started to like growl as I got closer to it. It curled its lips and showed its massive teeth, and the snarl got louder, and I was fucking fascinated at this. And as I can remember the saliva dripping from its like fangs onto the cover of the bed, and I just continued moving towards it. As I got under the head, I raised a hand, and the beast shied away and looked as though it was going to snap and bite at first. It was as if it was slightly worried about the outcome of this moment. It actually seemed a little scared. It then made up its mind up and brought its head back in towards me and to a distance where I could touch its chin. I don't know what happened at that point. I reached up and then I touched and I felt love. True love. The first time that I'd felt anything like that in my life. There was a care for me that would never now be gone. I knew we were together, we were one thing. The growling head had stopped growling and then started sniffing and snuffling me, every inch of me began. The nose pushing me and nudging me about. It was like trying to take in as much as it sent as it can. It was amazing. It was though it was like saying hello. And I was giggling and laughing as it did. It was tickling me and it was pushing me around playfully and I was letting it explore me. When it seemed to satisfy itself and had stopped nuzzling me, I used his nose to like stand up. At this point I could still touch him. I don't know what it was. I don't know why. I can't touch him anymore. I can feel him when he's close, but I can't touch him. But in the very early days I could actually physically touch him. So I used his nose and I put both arms around his muzzle and snout and was pushing my head against it. It was warm and it smelled now. It just smelled right. I rubbed my head against his and felt so much. And then he suddenly like knocked me away with a flick of his nose so that I fell on my bum and I giggled. And I heard this thing laugh in my head. And then I felt it think, hello. And then he licked my face with a tongue that was larger than me, and I remember the warm saliva covering my face, and strangely it felt correct and unique. This was it. I call it a posit. I named him later in life. I don't know why it's called a posit, but I call it that as if it was that he had never left me again. He never judged me, he never stopped me from doing anything I wanted to. He helped me and he granted me the power to achieve whatever I wanted. He's the werewolf part of me. When I read have you read The Golden Compass? I thought that author might have known something about posits, the soul creatures that the people have in his universe. I mean, in that universe they're all different and they're not very powerful. But the posits, as far as I know them, are just wolfen, they're all wolves. The posit was the werewolf bit of me, and we were inseparable from that point onwards. No one else could see him, and as a youngster I would tell people about him, and they would think I just had a really strange imaginary friend. We talked through telepathy, as I said before. He also made noises with his face, but obviously a wolf has not evolved to speak, so they were not the noises of any language or anything that could be recognised language. He then would tell me about his history, of the great things that he'd achieved with people. I was one of 5 others to whom he'd been linked. The posit would tap into my brain. He especially did this when I slept and would push the stories of his past into my mind. My dreams were full of screams, full of murder, death and destruction, and my favourite thing, the beautiful and fucking bright blood. I learnt to do things that a werewolf would need to do. To hunt was my favourite, to hunt, trap and kill. I learnt the skills of a wolf, I learnt the skills of the werewolf, and I learnt the skills of the man that would need to be developed in order to be the wolf. Each dream was a story and a lesson, and it would be taken from the best teacher. As a teacher, he is excellent. He knew the way that my mind worked, and he helped me construct a brain that could work with him and contain him when needed. It was beautiful. The main thing about my posit was he was always there, as he is now. My constant companion and best friend. He taught me about life. Taught me about the life to be. The fact that humans, as he calls them, he can't say the H, would hate us. And how they were our prey, only really worthy of us killing or using them for any of our requirements in life. He taught me how much fun it would be and could be to kill. He taught me of our past. Werewolves are not immortal, they live and die. But the posit stores our collective memories and follows the soul as it is reborn. That's how it works. We are what it's called, reborn or whatever. He showed me my history, reintroduced the multiple pasts that I had, gave me back my memories of who and what I had been. At first they were difficult to accept, but as I was educated in my reason to be, I learnt what seemed to be horrible acts that I'd committed were not. They were just me being me. I did not need to justify them. I was just a far superior being, and they were my prey. My posit told me of my origin. There had been one wild winter where, in some mountains somewhere, the posit thinks that it might be Russia. But he left ages ago, well before the area had been mapped or ever, so he could never find it after. There had been a pack of wolves and a pack of people starving, and they were both hunting each other. This state of affairs was not a good situation for either of them, as one pack or maybe both would eventually die. So one evening by the light of a full moon, that's where the moon thing comes from, the local shaman had the village take some of the mystical magic mushrooms. These are called fly-agaric mushrooms and are quite poisonous for if not prepared properly. The only safe way to do this with these mushrooms, the only safe way to process them would be for some other organism to eat it, and then you drink the piss. The shaman would usually use the reindeer for this purpose. Reindeer are kept and herded by the people in this area, but by now they'd all been killed off and eaten by the people and the wolves. The only animal they had available for the process was a wolf that had trapped the night before. Yeah, I know it sounds like utter bullshit, huh? Well, that's the story. The wolf ate the mushrooms, the shaman collected the wolf piss and then distributed it amongst the small band of villagers that were left. He was hoping that the gods, through this strange process, would grant someone an idea of how to get through the shitty situation in which they found themselves. I do realise that it does sound crazy, that they're drinking wolf piss with a trippy drug as part of its makeup. It does not seem like it could have happened. But if you think about it, who was the first person to drink the piss, of the reindeer? Think about it. Who was the first person to think, I know, we will feed these poisonous mushrooms to that deer and then drink their wee? How did that happen? So the wolf urine gave everyone a shared hallucination where they melded minds like fucking Vulcan style with the local pack of wolves, which also was not doing too well in the inclement minus 54 degrees centigrade that it was at that time. The humans during this shared trip came to some deal where the wolves would give their spirits to the people, and having done so, then both packs would survive the winter in a new strange combination. So by some shaman magic thing, the wolves released their posits so that they could combine with the humans and become a joint force for their survival. The deal seemed a bit one-sided to me at first. The wolves were sacrificed in a very bloody shamanic proper religious rite. The creature's spirits chose a human host from the humans on that day. The human the wolf soul chose would eat the heart of the wolf that chose them. They ate it raw too. That's proper doing magical things, eating it raw, as humans find raw meat difficult to swallow. Then there was a big feast, mostly of wolf, with a side order of wolf and wolf to follow. I think they may have had a cheese board at the end, who knows. The chosen humans all lived extraordinary lives. They also ate the other members of the tribe quite soon after. I mean, why not? They weren't fucking werewolves, were they? It seemed a little unfair that the wolves sacrificed themselves, but then the posit told me how they worked it out between them. The wolf spirit would become immortal while the human would stay under the control of the posit. If the posit wanted to stay with the human, then the human would be timeless too. They would age to a point where the posit felt comfy, then be that age until the posit wanted out of the relationship. It may have been the age of the wolf in the dog years or some other shit, who knows. The posits were independent but able to bind with the human when needed, or if it was a full moon, when for some reason they had no choice. They could be fully independent if they wished, but this would mean a lonely life. They tried to take on humans from the same tribe, but would have to be careful who they chose. The posits would then be passed on from human to human for all time. Not a bad deal when you think about it in those terms. So happily the wolves and the humans worked it out, and the human band survived and became the first of the werewolves that ever existed. It's a cool story. I don't know how true it is, but it sounds like it could have happened, maybe. Could be science, could be magic, could be bollocks. The posits could always move on and find a fresh person that had some relation to these first members of the tribe when they wanted to. I suppose we would talk about something related to them finding the DNA of the ancestors of these days, something like that. The posit would also find the best human mind that would match their own. This would mean that the relationship could be more likely to be successful. The posit, once bound to the human, could leave them if they wanted to, so they would often bounce around from person to person until they found a particular individual they liked, and someone who could mentally deal with the idea they had just been linked to a spirit wolf. As you can probably guess, not many people can deal with that. Most people think they are having a psychotic episode. Once the posit left, then the human would start to age again. It's magic. I don't fucking get it either. My posit is a dark one. He enjoys the simple, cruel pleasures of life. We both dislike the society that surrounds us, the sheep that call themselves people. I wish I'd have thought of the term sheeple, but that was a guy named W.R. Anderson in 1945, where he wrote, "The simple truth is that you can get away with anything in government that covers almost all the evils of time. Once in, nobody apparently can turn you out. The people, as ever, I spell it, sheeple, will stand anything. People are docile, compliant, or easily influenced. People likened to sheep." And that was by Merriam-Webster. He had found a matching mind in me, a superior intellect, he told me. He was my father figure and my guardian as I grew. He taught me about the truth of life and how to be, just be, and not consider anything else. As a baby, he held back, not allowing transformations, only sharing the stories of his youth to quiet my mind. He told me of his past, and I had the constant reassurance of his presence. He was there always, and I never cried as a child. It became a worry to my human parents. His name is Fenrir. I call him the posit. He is a wolf soul. That is the story of our get-together. And then, as I say, I'm currently telling this to the chief. If you've not listened to the other podcasts or videos or whatever, then I'm actually talking to the chief, the guy that's interviewing me after my capture from the army. So this is his reply after I told him all that. "Okay, Will, that's the same story that you have there." Oh, sorry, that's some story you have there. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember what he said. And then he said, "How many people have you?" So he's asked me how many people have I killed. And I could see and sense that he was not enjoying this journey into my mind. He was uncomfortable and angry at me and my life choices. This old, grizzled warrior sat there. I mean, I wonder how many people he killed. I would work on this aspect of his nature. I would see if I could poke the bear with a stick to make it lose its curls. I wanted to wind him up. So I told him, like I said, I've got no idea. And I shrugged and I smiled. You know, it's like I don't really bother counting. They die so easy and in such numbers, I replied. I could see the old man was getting wound up. He sniffed and I could sense the emotion building in him. He went from like being cool to actually wanting to hurt me. It was really great. I liked it. It was fun. I was able to do this while I was locked away. So he carried on. He asked me, he says, "Okay, Will, you've no idea how many you've killed. When was your first kill?" he asked. So I said, what do you mean, like humans or anything? I said, so he says that he meant humans. Oh, I could smell the anger and frustration that were building in him. So, okay, I replied, and I looked at the ceiling, and I looked like I was deep in thought, and then I'll pause for some time, and I said, just to wind him up a bit more, do you include your young? It was a great line. He leant forward, and with a tinge of curiosity, I like that word, and he goes, yes, Will, killing kids is included. And then I poked him a little bit more by saying I didn't know if it was worth their inclusion. I mean, they're way too easy to kill. And then before he could answer, I then said, well then, and I paused. I was still trying to get his name at this point. I thought if I paused, he'd give me his name, but he didn't. And then he says, well then, and I said, well then, I'll give you the story.